progress.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to share a reading with you from Science of Mind text, and then we'll have a moment of reflection on the reading, and then Jackson will bring us into the primary service with a song, and I will do an invocation. This is from the Science of Mind, page 488. The law of God is one of liberty and not of bondage. The Spirit of the Lord is everywhere. Freedom and liberty are also everywhere if we could but see them. Freedom, like truth, is self-existent and self-propelling. The Spirit, truth, and freedom are coexistent with one another. Whenever we are conscious of God or pure spirit, we are made free.
I'm held in love, I'm held in peace. God is holding me. With every breath, with every step, God is holding me.
And so this morning, recognizing that we are always held in the arms, mind, and the heart of God, we turn our attention inward to that center, that place in us, which is the center of our universe and from which we interact with the rest of the universe. And we know that as we connect with soul, as we connect with spirit, as we connect with the all in all, we are able better to live our lives, to meet our fellow human beings, to meet the experiences of life, and to meet life itself with joy and love, and with a sense of surety that all is well, despite appearances perhaps, but all is well. From this center, from this connected place, there is a freedom to be ourselves, to be loving and kind, to be giving, supportive, to be joyous, to be healthy and vibrant, to communicate, and to connect. And so we stay mindful that the connection to soul, to spirit, to God, to life is our freedom. Knowing this, we allow life in itself within us to unfold, and we call it good and very good. And so it is. Amen.
God is holding me. 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 God is holding me.
Thank you, Pamela and Jackson. Well, this morning we have a real treat. I want to tell you just a little bit about our speaker this morning. The first time I physically met him, it was at my installation at the Vancouver Celebration of Life Center, and I just remember his energy being so warm and so uplifting and empowering. And that feeling for me has stayed all throughout these years. Every time I've heard him speak, I've walked away feeling empowered and inspired. I've seen him as the president of Religious Science International for many years and always involved in the larger group, taking this teaching to the world, basically. And that's the position he had when we came together and became Centers for Spiritual Living. And so I know that you're really going to enjoy Dr. Kenn Gordon. So what I want you to do is I'm going to stop the screen sharing. I want you to go up to the upper right of the black part of the Zoom screen, put it on speaker view, and Dr. Kenn, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you, Reverend Angelica. I better unmute so that you can hear me, so that I live up to the accolade. It's so nice. I'm just sitting here contemplating what a great community you've put together in Eureka. It's marvelous. I'm looking at the things that you're doing. I see you've been extremely active, and I mimic what I heard about all of the beautiful volunteers and people stepping forward and doing things. I really noticed that that's the truth. And I'm not surprised, Angelica, because I know you well enough to know that you too have a personality that is attractive and that you are a go-getter. You're willing to step in and to do what's necessary in order for it to get complete and done. I have never been to the Eureka Center, which is odd because I've been to most of the centers in our movement. I think we have some 400 of them. And when I say most of them, I've probably been to 300 of them and visited them in person. And I know on several occasions we've tried to get together for me to come out to Eureka, and oh, do I ever wish that that could be the truth. I am, when it was put forward, what do you want to do this summer? The answer is, I want to travel and get back to people. Hopefully the Canadian border, I'm in Canada, hopefully the Canadian border is going to open towards the end of this month, which will be superb, and we'll be able to get moving and get back out into the communities again. It's one of the great things that I managed to manifest in my life was the ability to travel and to be able to meet and greet all of the wonderful people we have in Centers for Spiritual Living. And I calculate that there's about 500,000 active religious scientists that exist in the world today. Probably have a membership of about 250,000, and I'm sure some of you on this page itself probably aren't members. So I extrapolate for my own purposes and my own good. But nevertheless, it's tremendous. And Eureka has always been one of my favorite stops. And perhaps the reason is when I used to live in Southern California and travel to Vancouver and up to Kelowna, where I was born and raised, where my family was, I ended up being an expat down in the Palm Desert area, south, where I was farming. I used to travel through Eureka quite regularly. And I certainly enjoyed Eureka far more than I did Coos Bay, because Coos Bay was that place where I cannot ever remember being there without my car breaking down. So it's amazing the way those sort of things set up and work. So Eureka is like a haven for me. So good for you. I'm going to talk today on the soul's call to freedom. And I think the title I gave Angelica is What is Ours to Do? And I just want to open by saying that there's that within us that calls us to be in touch with our authenticity and our actualization. And my experience over the last 68 years is that when I follow that call, my life seems to flow fairly smoothly. When I don't follow that call, what happens is I usually end up in some kind of inner turmoil and conflict, and perhaps some of you can relate to that. It's just the nature of spirit itself that it calls and brings us forward. I've always been a person who's believed in holding a vision in front of me, and the vision for Centers for Spiritual Living is a world that works for everyone. Its purpose is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence. For me, that means awaken humanity to its own self-love and its own self-recognition. And as far as a world that works for everyone, it's a vision that's way out past anything that we can possibly imagine, how we could bring that to become the reality of our life. But that's what a vision's supposed to be, is it's outside the memory that we have. I'm fond of saying that with a goal it's like a recipe. You've got means and a way to achieve a goal. A vision is something beyond the goal. You don't know how to ever get it to take place or how to ever make it happen in your life or in your experience. And whether it's in the area of health, wealth, creative expression, or loving relationships, it all seems to work and run on that same principle, which is that as long as you put it in front of you and as long as you lay it out so that you can see it and you make it a priority in your life and in your consciousness to feed that energy that's behind it, what happens is spirit draws and attracts everything that is required and everything that is necessary in order for it to become a reality. Well, a lot of times in my experience, and you'll find that I speak a lot about myself, and probably it's because I really don't want to try to pretend like I could tell anyone else what it is theirs to do or what their soul's call to freedom is. But my experience is for myself is that when I lose the vision or when I drop the vision, what happens to me is I become lost and aimless. And I begin to draw and attract everything else in my life that's necessary in order to push me and put me towards a pathway to refine my truth, refine my freedom, refine the direction that I need to have in my life. So I learned a long time ago to put something in front of me and to make it and to peg it as something that I am going towards no matter what. It served me very, very well for the last 30 years. In ministry, knowing that I had a purpose in life, knowing that there was something that I needed to do. And I'm not talking about whether or not anybody else is happy with that. I'm talking about whether I'm happy with it. I discovered also that in my observations that the world is like a mosaic. And when people say to me, well, you can't make a world that works for everyone, it'll never work for everyone, that may well be true. However, I believe that every single individual and every single living entity and every single thing that exists on our plane of existence and experience here is there for a purpose. It's there to draw us and to drag us to something greater and bigger than perhaps what we understand and what we know. Growing up in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, I often saw that people, because of science and because of the basic knowledge that we have and knowing that everything serves its purpose, whether it be the gnats in the desert that pollinate the palm trees, or whether it be the mosquitoes that pester you in the summer in Canada, I find that it's the same thing, that there's a reason for that to be. There's a circle and a cycle of life, and when you fit into it, you fit into the mosaic in perfection. And to a large degree, in my experience, what I found is that when I forget that I'm part of that mosaic and that I'm necessary, what happens is that I run into conflict. When I say that we're part of a mosaic fitting perfectly, what I'm really saying is that when we're authentic, when we are our true selves, we fit into that picture in absolute perfection. That we come together in that perfection and blend and harmonize, and through synchronicity, we move and work towards what's best for all. That there's no reason for competition, there's no reason for fight, there's no reason for violence, there's no reason for bigotry, there's no reason for racism. All there is a reason to come together and recognize and know that the person or the thing or the item or the entity or the living being that is next to you is there for that purpose and for that reason. And you know, we learn in basic science that everything has a purpose and everything has a reason. And we somehow or other grew up in a belief system that said that everything is divine and everything has a purpose except maybe ourselves. You know, maybe perhaps I don't have a purpose in life. And that binds us and bounds us. It keeps us from experiencing the freedom that is the truth of who we are. And then what occurs in most cases is that we begin to make up stories about what we need to do or why we need to do it in order to become better, in order to be connected. And the reality is we're already connected. What we need to do is awaken to that realization, awaken to that spiritual magnificence within each and every one of us. And when we do, what happens is we fall perfectly into alignment with the universe itself and move forward. I don't know whether any of you know this or not, but I was born and raised in Kelowna, British Columbia, where my wife and I built a church. But in about 1982, I had the opportunity to move to Southern California, about 60 miles north of the Mexican border, south of Indio, California. And we moved to become farmers. I was a corporate executive before that, and I was working for various companies and that sort of thing. And I really wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied. As a matter of fact, I was in a terrible place and space of ennui. I couldn't get anything to work in my life, it seemed. And being a type A personality, what occurred for me was that I turned my whole life into work. So I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'd go to work, and I'd come home about 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then sit up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching television, then get up at 6 and go back to work again. And I found myself in a terrible place of frustration. I was doing what I thought I should do, but it didn't feel right with me and it didn't blend with me. I wasn't connected to the soul's call to freedom. I was connected to what my parents had taught me the call was, what my teachers had taught me the call was. I was connected to something within me that I believed was true, but didn't have a single place or space to work. In this teaching, we say you're perfect, whole, and complete. And we have the ability to say, yes, you're perfect, whole, and complete. And don't worry, I can fix that too. We're always trying to find something that we can do. to be able to make ourselves more connected to what we're already connected to. In the reading that was given today, it said that Holmes said that when you're in connection with God, you're in connection with freedom. And, you know, if we were to really define that term, when you're in connection with yourself, you're in connection to freedom. When you're in connection with who you are, you're connected to freedom. It's only when you start pretending to be something you're not that you find yourself bound. And that's really the experience, I think, that an awful lot of humanity suffer from. What did Emerson say? 99% of humanity lives in quiet desperation. And we live in quiet desperation because we haven't found the resonant truth of who we are. We haven't located it within ourselves. I certainly had my moments of it. I recall back in, I don't know, 1989, I guess, I was a practitioner at the Palm Desert Center in Palm Desert, California. I think I was already in ministerial class, but I'm not sure. My memory doesn't go back, and it really doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say was I was totally inculcated into the teachings of spirituality and the teachings of science of mind. And yet at the same time, I was farming 1,100 acres in Southern California. And it was becoming a real drag to be a farmer because I'd gone down there. Like I said, I was a corporate executive. I started to farm in California. Someday, maybe perhaps if I come visit you, I'll tell you how I ended up in Southern California. But anyway, I ended up there and I ended up farming, and I'd never even seen a tractor. I'd never been on a tractor in my life until I was 30 years old. So don't ask me how it occurred. It was divine. What happened was when I went into that ennui, when I was living in Vancouver, I got called and I ended up going down there. And I loved farming. I loved the simplicity of it. But once again, that type A personality came out, and it wasn't enough that I just farmed this 160 acres and that I live a quiet, peaceful life. Well, what occurred was I ended up turning on that type A and ended up developing and growing an 1,100 acre farm. And so I went right back into the corporate world again. And when I went right back into the corporate world again, I thought, oh, this isn't working. And once again, I fell into that ennui because I wasn't being true to myself. I wasn't being who I was born to be. I wasn't doing what I was called to do. I was trying to do, once again, what my mentors and what the past had told me I was supposed to do, what society said you need to do in order to be successful. So I remember that I was there and I was farming this rather large farm. And I went into that dark night of the soul again. That dark night of the soul, that feeling that I had lost all my freedom. Perhaps if you've been in a similar situation, you might just nod your head, because it really is something that I think is part of the human experience. It's there, that discomfort of that ennui, that depression, that sadness is there to push us in the direction we need to go. And when we listen to that, what happens is that we end up through a veil into a new life, a new way of being, a new experience. And if we manage to heal our inadequacy, our sense of inadequacy, so that what we do is we begin to just do what we were born to do, what happens is you bring the freedom and the joy back into your life and into your experience. So anyway, I was in this state of ennui, which is a nice way of saying depression, sadness. And I, like I said, also, I was a practitioner. So I was doing my treatment work. I was constantly treating. I was constantly putting into mind my joyful life and my joyful expression. But as often we do in treatment work, what we're actually doing is we're treating for our ailment rather than treating for our healing. And so I found myself in this situation where finally I just came against a wall on it. And so I phoned up, pardon me, I phoned up my practitioner at the time. His name was Reverend Tony Heggie. He wasn't a reverend then, he was in ministerial class with me. And we were prayer partners. And I can remember phoning him, and I was down in the desert, and he was living in the desert, and we were in ministerial school together. And I remember phoning him, and I remember saying, Tony, I need some help. And he said, okay, what do you want? I'll treat for you. And I said, no, I don't want you to treat for me. I said, I'm doing plenty of that. I don't have a problem with that at all. I want you to tell me what to do to get out of this. Here's the circumstance and the situation. And what I want is I want your opinion. I want your advice as to how I'm going to get out of this. I want you to give me something to do. What is ours to do? I want you to hand me something to do. Tony's a very bright man, and it didn't take him but a minute in contemplation and thinking to say, okay, I've got 3 things that I want you to start doing, and I want you to start doing them right now. I said, great. What are they? He said, well, the first thing I want you to do, and you might choose to write these down yourself. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to start a gratitude list. Before you go to bed at night, every single night, what I want you to do is I want you to write down 10 things that you're grateful for that's going on in your life right now. I said, okay, that's good. I can do that. And he said, and here's the hook in that. I don't want you to repeat them. I don't want you to say, I'm grateful for my grandson, or I'm grateful for my son at the time. I want you to come up with something new, 10 new things every single day. You know, it's really easy to do that for about a month. And then all of a sudden you become repetitive, and that forces you to start looking at other things in your life. It forces you to start looking at your life in a different way, in a different view, so that you can recognize what you're grateful for. Because the truth of the matter is that 99% of your life is probably beautiful. I'd even be willing to say 90%. In other words, the vast majority of your life is something that you can be so grateful for. It's so magnificent. And as human beings, we have a tendency to look at the minutiae in our life and look at the problem. And we have to remember that what we focus on grows and expands. So if I focus on my depression and put my energy into my depression, the depression will expand. That's the law in activity. So if I keep my mind on something that I'm grateful for, then that gratitude expands, and it becomes a habit for us to be able to do that. If I keep my mind on my vision and lay it out before me, then nothing else seems to deter or disturb me for very long, because I understand and I realize that that energy must expand. If I keep my eye on my prosperity, if I keep my eye on my energy, if I keep my eye on my love life, if I keep my eye on my creativity, it expands. If I keep my eye on the ennui, it expands. What we focus on grows. We know that. We've all been in science of mind long enough to understand that. The second thing that Tony told me that I needed to do was he said that I needed to do something new in my life. Now, I've been totally involved in farming now for 10, 12 years. I was pretty steady with that. I've been in science of mind, and I'd taken all the classes. I was in ministerial class. I was studying metaphysics. And Tony said, you need to do something new and something fresh. I'm not talking about taking a class in science of mind. You need to take a class in something that you haven't done before. Well, in my particular case, what I did was that I chose to take a class in creative writing at the college of the desert. So I went and I started to go every Wednesday night for 3 hours and learn how to write. The gratitude list helped lift me. The new idea kept me focused on something fresh and something new in my life. We always need to have something new and fresh. We can't stop learning. We can't stop growing because that's not our nature. And when we do that, what we're doing is we're giving up our freedom. I don't care whether you're learning how to make orchids grow or whether you're planting tomatoes for the first time, but we must learn something new all the time because it keeps us sparked and alive. The third thing Tony told me to do was he said, and this part about you not wanting treatment, he said, you need to start treating for something bigger than yourself. You need to stop treating for your problems and start treating for something outside of yourself. And the reason that that was so powerful in my experience after I started to do it was that it lifted me out of my little self. And it placed me into a position where I could see something larger and something bigger. So in 1989, I started to treat for world peace. And I became part of the peace movement. And I put it out there that what I wanted was world peace, even though I had no idea how the world could be at peace. And as a matter of fact, I often would argue with myself about whether or not it was a possibility in the first place. And then I would remember that the core being of you and the core being of me is the divine infinite itself. And that just because I can't figure it out in my small mind doesn't mean that that power can't figure it out in another way. And so what I did inevitably through it was surrender to that higher power. It's surrender to the infinite intelligence of the universe of which I'm part of and you're part of. Now, I'll share with you that the crux of what is ours to do comes now. Because what occurred in 1989, moving into 1990, you remember, is the first Gulf War. And I was living in apparently something similar to Humboldt County with Lock 'em Up or whatever that was being shared earlier. And I found myself in a situation as the first Gulf War and the first President Bush began to move in that direction of speaking out for peace. But I was watching television and reading the newspapers. I was talking to my friends and to other people. And my opinion began to change. We could say I was propagandized, but the social construct was telling me how essential it was that that we go to war in Kuwait, in the Gulf. And so I found myself in a situation where, even though I'd been working on it now for probably the better part of a year, that I actually began to slip in and drop that whole thing from my experience and my expression. Shame on me. Shame on me. I bought back into the zeitgeist of humanity, to the collective consciousness, instead of recognizing and realizing what I was doing. Now, I'll share with you, by that time I had greater visions and stronger visions that were out there, and that there was some value in my learning that lesson the way that I did. I still treat for world peace today. It's still something that I do every single day. It's the first treatment I do in the morning when I wake up. It's the first realization that I have. It's the first understanding. It's the first awakening that I turn to. I still keep a gratitude list, and I still learn something new every single day to the best of my ability. But what happened with my ideal about world peace was I discovered what it was really required to live a fully actualized and authentic life on this plane is all about. And what that is I have clear values in my life. And I learned that it wasn't up to me to make my values match my opinions. It was up to me to make my opinions match my values. In other words, as we move into this time right now, coming out of the pandemic, this experience of liberation that's taking place around the world, I run into a lot of things that I still am shameful for. I was driving down the street the other day and I'll give you an example. I was driving down the street the other day and on one particular corner on the way to get home to my place, there's always a different person every time it seems, but there's always somebody with a sign begging for money on the side of the road. I was coming back from Home Depot with some wood and lumber because I had work to do. And I was driving along in my pickup truck and I drove up to the corner. And here's this able-bodied young man, in my opinion and view, standing there with a sign out saying, jobless, I'll take anything, even a smile. And I can remember, or I don't just remember, I feel it, the sense that I have within me. The opinion, the bigotry, the prejudice, where I look at it and say, you know what, you're probably 28 years old, you really should get a job. What's wrong with you? And then I have another 5 minutes to drive to get to my house. And when a thought like that comes up in my mind, when a thought like that shows up, it reflects to me that I'm still allowing my opinions to control my values rather than my values control my opinion. My value is that there's equality in the world. My value is that everyone lives with the awareness of who they are. My value is that everyone should have enough food and enough water and enough education or access to. Everyone should have access to technology. I could go on and on about what my values are because I've made them really clear to myself. And if you want to check out some of them, just go to the organizational design model on csl.org and you'll see all of our values and our principles laid out. And they don't have to be yours, but you have your own values. What I don't value is I don't value someone in pain. I don't value someone having to live in agony. I don't value someone living in a world where there isn't equality. I don't value someone dying when it's not necessary for them to do. I don't value whatever the situation was that put the young man on the street. That's not one of my values. My value is the freedom of the soul. My value is the awakening of humanity. My value is the insistence on basic human rights. And in order to do that, what I discovered years ago and what I practice today, and believe me, I have not completed the practice. It's an ongoing chore and an ongoing job and an ongoing discipline. And that is to hold my values in front of me like my visions so that I know clearly what they are. And when I hear that chattering mind come in to tell me how it's not true, to instead turn to the value instead of turn to the chattering mind. Turn to the value instead of turning to the opinion. Because I can change in a moment on my opinion, but the values I hold steadfast in my experience and my expression. When we as a human race begin to define and hold and move towards our value base instead of our opinion, what we will create is a world that works for everyone. That's the simple fact of the matter. So what is ours to do? Stop changing our values to meet our opinions and start changing our opinions to meet our values. And that's the practice for today. God bless you. Know that you're loved and know that I see within you the divinity itself. Now, if you'll join with me, I'll close us with a spiritual mind treatment. So let's come together and center ourselves in that spot that we're never separate from. Let's open ourselves to the recognition and the understanding that there is this divine intelligence and that that is all that there is. There is God and absolutely nothing else. Each and every one of us is unified with this power. And so I speak my word right here and right now for anyone who is open and receptive to this consciousness. I speak my word recognizing and knowing that everything and all things that are unlike the truth of who we are made obvious to us. That they show up in our day-to-day living, they show up in our aches and our pains, they show up in our conflicts. And that from this moment forward, our lives are changed at depth because from this moment forward, we are aware of what they are. It is the divinity itself squeezing in order to produce the authentic self. So recognizing this, I know that from this moment forward, no one on this call, no one open and receptive can hide that. That they see it instead of an ailment, they see it instead of a pain, they see it instead of an anguish, they see it instead of a depression, as a realization and a recognition. That higher power that is the truth of you and the truth of me, the truth of everyone, actively works within us on a subconscious way in a level that brings truth forward into our experience and our expression. And as we're aware of it, it dissipates and dissolves it so that it floats back into where it came from, the nothingness of life itself, and instead returns to us everything that is required, everything that is necessary in order to be able to manifest the freedom that is yours and mine by birthright. That higher power operates and activates right here and right now, everything that's required. It draws and attracts to us every single thing that we need to know at this time in order to pull us into the truth of our own being. At the same time, as I say, it dissolves anything that is unlike itself, leaving only the living manifestation, realization, and experience of spirit in our lives in every way. Accepting and expecting that this is true, I'd give unconditional gratitude that it's already so. I surrender it back to that universal mind, which is your mind, my mind, and all mind. And I let it be my truth. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.